Good afternoon and welcome to the latest episode of the FRS Recruitment Leading Through People webinar series, where today's topic is the future of recruitment and talent acquisition. Just a bit of housekeeping. We'll have our usual poll. You can vote on it just at the bottom of your screen down here. And the question today is, in what areas will organizations increase their talent acquisition budget the most post-COVID-19? So will they spend money, employers, on employer brand? B, recruitment tech, C, outsource recruitment, or D, in-house resource. Just on your right-hand side of your screen, there's a chat, and you can ask any questions there. And just, it's really great if you do, because it sort of really makes an interactive session. This week, as usual, I'm joined by regular guest Kevin Green, previously CEO of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, HR strategy advisor, and author of the best-selling book Competitive People Strategy. How's things in London, Kevin?
It's fine. It's sunny. It's warm. We're looking forward to bank holiday tomorrow. So yeah, things are okay.
Good stuff.
As long as you don't look at the jobs numbers. I'll talk about reported jobs in a minute. It gave me a shock this morning.
Positivity, Kevin. Positivity. We're only interested in positive news today. Also, real pleasure this week to be joined by Hung Lee, curator of Recruiting Brain Food, co-founder and CEO of Workshape.io. I've known Hung for many years. I think Bill Boorman introduced us probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And I suppose, how's lockdown going for you, Hung?
Okay, I'm into it basically. So I've kind of got over the depression phase, and I'm kind of thinking, okay, fine, every day Sunday, I've just got to do as much as I can, and not get too lazy. But yeah, it is what it is. You know, this is the boat we're all in.
Very good, very good. Just Hung, could you give us a bit of your background, like on how you've got to this sort of massive worldwide network of recruiters? How many at last count? 12,000 or 14? It just keeps going up and up and up. And 22,000 now, hombre. Bloody hell, man! Bloody hell.
Yeah, it's crazy numbers. All by accident, Colin. Is the truth. None of it by design. Definitely not. It was just an idea I had. Ended up just doing it out of really a passion project for sure. You know, there was no idea that it would ever be anything more than that. But yeah, I mean, over the months and years, basically people have been hopping on and joining me for the ride, which is fantastic. So yeah, it's been a great journey to be part of, and I feel like I'm doing something useful for people. So yeah.
It's great. I think every Sunday morning we get our Recruiting Brain Food newsletter, and it's really what it is for people who don't know is basically curated really top quality content from recruitment, talent acquisition, HR, and a bit of other stuff as well, which I really like, which makes us sort of think about it. You were you started in agency recruitment, did you, or like you sort of got into agency recruitment?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Didn't we all? I mean, I don't know many recruiters that started anywhere else. So yeah, I was agency for 10 years, 9 years now. So straight into basically Web 1.0 back in the day, recruiting software developers, web developers, we call them back in the day, to kind of e-com type businesses, e-publishing businesses that were coming online at the time. So and basically stayed in more or less the technology space for about 9 years before doing in-house, training, consultancy, launched a startup, Workshape, and then most latterly, running Brain Food, which I guess is a media business now. So yeah.
Yeah. So you got out of the into the easy road from the really difficult agency sort of sides, So I see Kevin.
Agency was easy, man. Agency was too easy. I tell you a story. Agency got to the point where I was being able to perform at the top of the business with, I would say, no more than 5 to 10% of my mental engagement. I remember very clearly the day I resigned to my boss and left the agency world. What was happening? I was having a conversation with a candidate, and I must have had a hard night the night before, whatever. I was so dog tired, but I was having a conversation, qualifying call with this candidate, and I had worked out how to basically ask a question in order to prompt a long response from this candidate, so that I could get a bit of a snooze. in between times. And I did that like maybe for 20, 30 minutes, just, walk up and then asking a question. And then I did all of this. And when I finished the call, I was like, firstly, a bit proud of myself, saying, oh, look, I can actually do this half asleep. But then I had a shocking realization. Hung, you've completely lost respect for this job. And you've actually lost respect for your candidate. You've lost respect for your business and your boss. I resigned straight away.
Very good.
And what did you think you were going to do next, or did you have no idea?
Of course, no idea, Kevin. Never any idea. That is the idea, right? I'm just plunging. No, but it was clear to me. I mean, it was clear to me that I'd just lost that fire for this style of job, not recruitment, but the idea of constantly trying to hit the target. And I was billing top 5%, I think, in that business, doing okay, earning money, but it became kind of meaningless. And it was that moment where I thought, you know what, I've got to the point now where I'm really grinding my morale down. And I realized if I kept on being in that business, I'd end up sabotaging my performance. I'd end up being one of those, malcontent type people that you have to manage out of a company because he's just acting up because he's basically subconsciously self-sabotaging.
That's happened to Kevin. That's happened to Kevin lots of times in his career today.
No. I'm a bit like Hung. I always just jump out from one into the other and see what's out there.
Yeah.
Never.
Just in terms of because I'm interested to hear both of your thoughts, but particularly you, Hung, in terms of building a network.
For a job in my life.
Yeah. Hung, how do you sort of build a network? What are those building blocks of basics that people need? Because I think it's one of the key things in recessionary times that you can sort of fall back on and is really critical sort of in any business, regardless, recruitment, management, HR, etc. So
2 tracks, man. I mean, I've always got 2 tracks in my mind when I think about network building. And they're 2 different mindsets, but you've got to kind of run them in parallel. So what I would do, by the way, everyone has networking. They've got their own criteria, how to network, their own techniques and so on. But my approach is to think, number one, I've got to do it systematically. So in other words, I can't just casually think, oh, I'm going to just accrue a network through my daily operating business and things will just happen effectively. No, you need to have a CRM, you need to have a system, and you need to have a discipline to keep expanding your network in the direction that you want to go in. So for instance, if you're a recruiter and you're, maybe you're right now job insecure, who isn't, right? And you may think it's a good idea to invest a bit more time in networking. Well, great. You need to have a plan around that. And you need to have a system around it. And you need to have numbers and targets, meaning, the things that we learn in recruitment, you have to apply to yourself in order to do the network build. So at a very basic level, this is quantity, the expansion of the size of your network. So I may say to myself, okay, I'm going to interact with at least 10 new people this week on LinkedIn that I've never spoke to, but are in my space that I want to interact with. I want to do that and have that as a target and a behavior that you adopt. You might then have a number of connections you want to make, a number, whatever it is, but you have to have a system, some measures and some behaviors that regression plan back off that. So that's one track. So that's what I call the operating system. Like that just happens irrespective of your working day or irrespective of your mood or whatever. It's just a system you deploy. The second part of it is that you've got to kind of enrich those those connections. So you can't just say, oh, I've just collected 10,000 people in my network. That's all well and good, but you need to then deepen those relationships and enrich it further. One of the main things that I've learned in building something like Recruiting Brain Food is that if people kind of get to know you and get to know that you may be adding value a little bit to their day in some way, they're going to really give you that back. They're going to give you a ton of goodwill. A social scientist might call it social capital. So I'm sure this is a term familiar to a lot of people, but you think of it as a way to accrue social capital, goodwill from all of these people that you're connecting with. How do you do that? Well, you typically engage positively, maybe you add value in some way, maybe you offer help in some way, just generally be a useful and valuable community contributor. And whilst you're doing all of that sort of altruistic stuff, quote unquote, and it is altruistic at heart, but there's a kind of a positive outcome for yourself through this altruism, meaning you would accrue this social capital, you'll build your profile, you get a little bit more well known in your industry and amongst those people. And then when sort of you're in a position where you may require help or you need those people to do something, you've built some capital with that person, so those things will activate. So to summarize very quickly, essentially, if someone feels that you've got a relationship with them, like us three have relationships, right? I mean, you message me, Colin, say, "Oh, do you want to come on to your podcast, your Crowdcast?" I've said yes without even thinking about it. There was no calculation of ROI. There was no like clever message that you sent, Colin. You know, I know that's beyond you anyway, man. But but the thing is, there was no requirement for you to do anything other than say, "Hung, are you available? Do you want to do it?" And because we had built social capital together, we had invested in this relationship together, I was a yes to it straight away. And I would say that's how you network. You need to think of those two things. So system on one side, social capital on the other.
Cool. Kevin, you're one of the best people I know, and actually, I suppose, been productive from a network. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's all right having a great network, but how do you sort of, monetize that, or, you know what I mean, make it productive, make a living from that? Because really, over the past few years since you've left the REC, probably that's really what you've done, I suppose,
Well, I think there's two things. One thing is Hung's right. I think you don't go into it thinking about the money, really. I think that's a nice consequence of it. So I think you go in going, what have I got to give? What can I share? What am I interested in? What am I passionate in? And for me, I suppose a lot of that's about content. There are lots of things I've got views. So I write quite a lot. I write blogs. I do lots of webinars and podcasts. And that's about just giving, really. There's no money in any of that. I think that's just about saying, look, I'm here. I've got some views. I've got some opinions. And if there's some value, then people extract out of it what they want. And they follow you on Twitter or they follow you on LinkedIn. And for me, it's like when I'm writing stuff or I'm thinking about stuff or I'm putting together a webinar or something, you go to your network, you go, who else is out there saying interesting stuff? How do we come together to add some value to another audience? And so I think you have to start with it. And I think I don't use social capital. I call goodwill equity is what I call it. So that's same thing really, I think. But it is about, you put stuff out there, you add some value, you make connections, you build relationships. And out of that comes people come to you and say, will you speak at a conference? Would you? I'm looking for a non-exec, or people will introduce you. Lots of people introduce me to other people that are looking for somebody. And so that's what I do really. Yeah. And that's what it works. I think you've got, for me, it's supplementary. It's not the core of who I am and what I'm trying to do, but I love it. And I like learning, and it's a way of learning and tapping in, reading other people's content and providing good content yourself. So I think it's the same thing, really. I think you've just got to be visible, provide good content, create some value, and see what comes back. It's a bit House of Dreams, isn't it? You build it and they will come.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people look to the likes of you guys and sort of see, God, these guys have been around a while and they've built this. But I think everyone can do that at their own level initially and sort of and really build, and it works within everyone's sort of network as they go along. I suppose just moving on to really what we're here to talk about today, which is the future of recruitment and talent acquisition. And I have a real keen interest in this. I wrote sort of a master's paper on artificial intelligence in recruitment and all that type of thing. And I just, obviously we're in a really sort of difficult situation at the moment. So I want to try and figure out, first of all, like, where's the market at now? What's really happening? And is that going to throw what was probably a changing market anyway out of kilter further? Or are we just going to end up where we were going to get to anyway in 5 years? So first of all, Kevin, if we just in terms of the market, particularly you've some stats on the UK market in terms of what's happening in terms of unemployment and recruitment, etc. And I have some stuff on Ireland, and maybe Hung can give us a little bit of an overview of world stuff. So.
I suppose there's a couple of things. One is just this, what this event is, and again, everyone uses the word unprecedented, but I mean, I've been around a long time, and been through many recessions, a very long time. And one of the things I would say is, and so I've gone back and looked at the data in previous recessions. And when I was at the REC, I arrived in 2008, so I went through that recession. And it was big and it was significant, 6 quarters of contraction, a fundamental period of disruption. But this is completely of a different league. Now, if you look at it from a macro perspective, just look at what's happened. So we've got 2 million people registering for our universal benefit. We've got 6.3 million people in the UK that are furloughed. That gets you to 25% of the workforce are not working, and are dependent on government at this moment in time. Now, clearly, we had about 1.3, 1.4 million and a very low unemployment rate of under 4%. So I think my forecast is it's already at 12%. And it will continue to rise. So lots of those people that are furloughed, and I'm working with lots of HR directors at the moment, are in the process of thinking, how do they restructure their businesses? So there is no doubt that employment figures are going to reduce significantly and unemployment is going to grow in the short term. Now, what does that mean from a recruitment perspective? Well, one of the things, if I look at the agency sector first, is, the REC have published a report on jobs today. And, anything but above 50 is growth, anything below 50 in terms of the index is contraction. It's been trundling along at 52, 53%. March, it dropped to 35, which is a very steep drop. But in terms of what's happened in April, the figures come out today, it's at 13. Never been anywhere near that. It's never got anywhere below 30 before. So this is really shows you the severity and the speed of the decline. It's like the economy's been hit by a meteorite and some sectors have just closed. The Office of Budget Responsibility are talking about, impact in terms of GDP, 35% reduction in April alone. So, there is no doubt that hiring is just stopping. So when I talk to agencies, it's 80 to 90% of perm hiring's gone. It's evaporated. You've got about 10%. And what you've then got is about 50 to 60% reduction in both temps and contractors. So from an agency perspective, it's very severe. At least 50% of the market has gone and it's declining. It will continue to decline. I think if you look at the in-house market, a lot of those people have been furloughed. I mean, it's difficult to gauge the impact on that particular group of people. But I think there's no doubt that organizations are going to be looking, when they start to make the decision about furloughing, thinking about how they bring those people back, how many they bring back, whether they make some people redundant, whether they outsource activity. So there is a real period of disruption in all of that in relation to the recruitment sector. But one thing I would say, and again, it depends whether you think it's a V-shaped or a U-shaped economic downturn, but hiring activity comes back. As soon as there's growth, as soon as the economy starts to pick up, there will be hiring activity going on. And again, there will be some initial activity just to get, if you think about hospitality, most of that sector starts to open up, we'll start to get growth again. So, and if you know, and one thing I know about the recruitment sector is if you get 2%, 3% economic growth, recruitment outperforms that on the upturn. So it will be growing by 7, 8, 9%, because that's historically what's happened, and I don't foresee it being any different. I think what we've got is a real period where people are going to be struggling, however you do, whether you're in-house or your agency. I think the issue is there will be hiring. There are things that people need to be doing. Candidates need to be supported, and I think businesses need to be talked to. We need to understand what they're going to be doing around workforce planning, how they're planning to restructure their businesses. They are still on the hunt for specific skills and talent. I've seen that happen over the last few weeks. People are still going, actually, is a fantastic candidate. I'm going to take the opportunity to nab them. Even if they're not hiring in any kind of great numbers, there will be activity going on. So I think there's loads in that, and I'll shut up and let Hung say a few things.
Yeah. Hung, what are you seeing? What sort of, I suppose, feedback are you getting through your network, sort of worldwide through that?
Well, I mean, I wish Kevin would continue. I mean, it's It's no, I don't joke. I think it's important information. I don't sort of refute any of Kevin's analysis there. I think, to be honest with you, I think there's a growing consensus. This is what it is. You know, I mean, we see it on the front line. You know, recruiters are seeing this on the front line themselves. Hiring freezes, layoffs, furloughing. This is, you know, recruiters basically need growing businesses and growing economies in order to do our work. And every projection you see talks about a very steep, very deep, and maybe prolonged recession at a global level. So this ultimately means it's going to be very, very tough times for very many of us. And that's reflected, you know, this is a global issue. We're an interconnected economy. We cannot say, oh, we're going to be okay, we're in an island, or, you know, whatnot. No, you know, we have wholly dependent on a lot of the throughput of consumer behavior across the planet. I think the ONS actually came out they come out, I think, with monthly reports on what's going on. So UK data, do check it out. It's not that dry. It's worth actually having a look-see. And you can see certain sectors that have completely locked down. We know what they are: hospitality, recreation, travel. All of those sectors have literally gone to zero. But there's a knock-on effect on all of that. You know, there's a knock-on effect on having people not go to the office, transportation. What about food retail? All those people that might go get a lunch or a coffee, and all those places. So it's going to be, it is massive. The question really is how do, you know, I think what I think we got to think about now is, as people in the industry, is what do we do now? Like, we know it's like this.
Yeah.
How do we recruiters stay relevant? Are there pockets in the market that will grow or thrive in these types of circumstances? How do we pivot into those? What else can we do to basically stay around in the business? And if not in the business, which is the truth for a lot of people, I'm afraid to say, where else are recruiting skills compatible to? You know, what related sort of industries can we pour into? These are real decisions we have to make.
What industries do you think they are, Hung? I think that's really interesting. Where are recruiters' talents really compatible with and best used?
I think there's loads. I mean, unfortunately, some of them do also align with that are equally challenged, right? So, you know, I would immediately say, hey, get into retail, you know, get into brokering, get into all of those places that, you know, recruiter ultimately is a broker of talent. And so any kind of brokerage would work. But of course, all of those are all screwed because it's still dependent on the broader fundamentals. Maybe there's places perhaps where a lot of the research work that we're doing online could potentially suit those more technical recruiters, let's say. You know, there's a lot of forensic type work that could be interesting. Obviously, there's a move into HR potentially, move into marketing potentially. But again, they're all distressed sectors, and they're all kind of distressed functions. So, you know, it's challenging.
Yeah. So I think there's the current sort of situation, economic situation in Ireland. I think we had this conversation with an economist about a month ago, Susan Hayes-Culleton. In Ireland, we went through the worst recession, like I suppose the 2008, 2009 recession in Ireland was much deeper and longer than I suppose the UK was, and we had the IMF here. You know what I mean? For, you know, 2 years running the country. So we went through an awful lot of pain and really built it back up, you know, but our numbers are just horrendous. We've 1.1 million people out of a working population of 2.2 million taking some sort of benefit, or furloughing scheme. Our furloughing scheme works differently to you guys in that you have to stay in the job. So, which is actually an interesting. The employer-employee relationship has been kept, which I think has been really good and worked well. So I think there's this thing that at the moment we're all in this together, right? So all sectors, all industries, everyone, and I think the challenge is going to be, and I think it's a timing thing as we start to move out of, I suppose, and back to whatever normal is, and however long that takes, certain sectors will, as you say, Kevin, get the upside in terms of recruitment. But in terms of, I suppose the vendors within the recruitment sector, right? So we've got agency, like what do agencies got? What have they got to do really to survive this, Kevin? Do you think?
Well, the agencies, I mean, most agencies, I did something this morning with a whole lot of agencies in the UK, and I think they'd furloughed a lot of their staff. They're in the process of starting to look at the market and what's likely to happen, and think about how many people they bring back and how many they let go. So clearly they're in a process of survival. They're renegotiating premises costs. They're thinking about whether they can work remotely. They're looking at adjacent space and seeing whether they can pivot. They're doing all of that. But the question is, if the fundamentals aren't there, there are only a few things you can do. And one is, I think, focusing on candidates. So what are you going to give to the candidates? And I was saying, you've got to go back to the big strategic question. What do you want to be famous for? How are you going to differentiate yourself? Because what you don't want to do is to hang around, get to the other side, and then be in a price war, because everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's hungry. And the only way an HR department or a procurement department can differentiate you is around price. So I think you've really got to think about, have I got candidates that no one else has got? Have I got knowledge about a sector or a specialism that will differentiate me and allow me to charge a premium? And again, I think they've got to think about, actually, if the in-house teams are being made redundant, what type of service can I offer to organizations where they want a third party, an RPO, some kind of managed vendor? So I think there's that. I think agencies are looking at technology. I think they should have been doing this a long time ago, but I think they're trying to move up pace. People start to use chatbots, starting to use things where they can really start to become a little bit more efficient and provide better service. So I think there's a lot of things that agencies are doing, but none of it is easy. And I think that's just part of the stuff. I mean, the in-house teams, and I think Hung said something quite interesting. I think there is a bit, because HR, even though it's distressed, are actually having to do a lot more and I take a lot more accountability. So I think there is some HR functions that, if you're multi-skilled and you want an HR career, if I was in my old HR job as an HR director, I'd be taking some of my brilliant people out of resourcing and getting them to do some organizational design work and think about how I run some restructuring programs. I'd be thinking about what can I do around rewards. So I think there'll be a lot going on, because organizations, particularly where people are high in the cost mix, are going to be thinking about, what do I need to do to restructure the business so that we are, right size for the market as we see it coming back, and how can we provide more service and more value to our customers? So I think there's opportunities for in-house people to move into other parts of HR, and I think agencies, it's batten down the hatches, be strategic, think about technology, focus on what you're bloody great at. Really be.
I think that's really interesting. I've been thinking a lot about this in the last couple of years as we sort of went through a transformation ourselves in FRS. And really, I think agencies have, in good times, naturally become very transactional. So they don't really focus on the candidate, and it becomes a sort of just a transactional situation. I think agencies really need to move into sort of the advisory and guidance sort of areas. Like, to me, if there's a candidate out there, and they're getting free advice from free advice right away through the process from a recruitment agency recruiter, why would they go direct? I just, what I mean? I don't really sort of get that generally. I think it's basically because agencies aren't doing really a good enough job in terms of bringing that candidate and offering them the advice and negotiation piece right away through the process. Now, obviously, direct employers have big budgets in terms of employer brand and advertising to suck those sort of individuals in. But I think agencies have got to start competing for those candidates, potentially almost against their clients. And I think you're right on the in-house side. I think there will be opportunities for in-house recruiters to move into different sectors. What do you think, Hung?
I mean, what in-house people should be doing has been a running conversation. So the fact that it's kind of like a discussion point in multiple places is I think evidence of the fact everyone is very, very conscious of what do we actually do when there's no vacancies to fill. And we're just talking on the chat stream there with Valerie and Maria on this. And internal mobility is actually a very important topic. Always has been, but it's been neglected. Simply because it was always easier to hire externally, inside out, rather than to move people internally around. But this is now a big priority for businesses, simply because a lot of organizations, of course, have had to have enforced redeployments. If you're running a big business and you have to make a big bunch of people redundant, you would definitely want to try and redeploy those people rather than have to make that decision. But then we're finding out, we don't have the information about what these people actually are any good at, because we don't have a link between our assessment data and our performance data. And actually, the last bit of information about what this guy did was 3 years ago when he was a candidate. It's totally irrelevant now. He's a totally different person. So there's lots of things I think that a TA can do. I think internal mobility is definitely one of those things, but we're still kind of scrabbling around at a shrinking pie, I mean, the harsh reality is this: when the market is growing, basically, it's reasonably easy to be a decent recruiter. I would say. I mean, one of my probably my only capability as an agency recruiter was to be able to spot a growing market. It's true, I wasn't any good at the job. The raw ability to do the job, the closing of the sale, offer negotiation, being, all this super organized. No, I was just very good at spotting, hang on, that's likely to be growing. If I sit in this, the tide will carry me home, kind of thing. And I was able to do that. And I think that's still a good policy, but there's only a few of those strands left now. It's not like, I'm going to go into tech, quote unquote. There's a very good slide deck, actually. I should share this with people who aren't actually on the Brain Food, but I shared it actually last week. But it was a slide deck by a lady called Steph Smith, who basically tried to look at the second and third order effects of COVID-19. She's a reader of Recruiting Brain Food, actually. So she sneaked in a lot of this recruiting data in there, which I thought was super interesting. And the most interesting slide for me was where investments were going, according to her business, in terms of where the VCs were parking their funds. And that was, I think, a reasonably good sign for a recruiter thinking of a pivot into a different market. Where do we need to go into? Of course, health tech, of course, biotech, of course, cloud security, cybersecurity, everything to do with the new distributed way of working, all of those types of things likely to be growing markets. And yeah, they're good places to try and jump into and compete, but be aware, obviously, competition is going to be amazingly fierce, like, again, unprecedentedly fierce, probably.
Like, obviously, the whole vendor market, the whole, I suppose, market for selling into sort of the talent acquisition area has shrunk dramatically, just literally overnight. What are you seeing in terms of those vendors, those HR tech, recruitment tech, job boards? What's happening to all these companies who are sort of flying high, probably up till March?
Getting crushed. That's it. Yeah. It's getting crushed. Everyone's crushed. No one's sitting from the back of this. I think we were all shocked and thought, oh my God, woe is me. The only thing saving us from all of this kind of apocalyptic thinking is that everyone else is in the same boat. Globally, across industry, we're all in the same boat. The vendors I'm speaking to, recruitment tech vendors I'm speaking to, they're fully aware that this year is absolutely cooked in terms of their revenue and their plans and all the rest of it. They're retrenching. A lot of them are actually pivoting and making really interesting products, often giving them away for free because they know that they're not going to do any sales right now. They may as well try and build market and brand building. But sadly, a lot of them ain't going to survive, particularly the startups that are based on,
I think that's absolutely right, Hung. I mean, basically, there was a lot of money thrown at HR tech. If you just look at the availability of capital for technology businesses in this space, it's been huge over the last few years. And what you will see is the private equity and the venture capital funds are just going to look to make sure, that they'll look to push people together. They'll look to try and get some economies. They'll look for people that have got some kind of revenue return. But again, then, they will also just go, now's not the time, and pull their money out. And so that we're going to lose some potentially creative and innovative vendors. I think the issue is there'll be some opportunities for people to pick up some good tech and plug it together and bring innovative opportunities to the marketplace. So I think, as always, it's destructive, but there are opportunities out of it.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing how I think Mandy Purdy just in the chat there is saying they got a ridiculous deal from CV Library. You know what I mean? And they're offering it to everyone, and it's like that's what happens, isn't it? People just panic and start giving away free stuff, and you know what I mean. It sort of clouds the market, all over the place. It just goes.
CV Library's got a lot of money though, so they're going to be okay.
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the advantages of being a CV database is that you've basically already built the value. So it's quite easy to make a margin on just selling access to that value. You can sell it at X amount of times. So Lee's probably being smart, as he is very smart, and simply recognizing no one's got budget to spend. Now is the time simply to get usage and market growth. Collect that email.
But can other businesses learn from that then? Do you know what I mean? So how do you in the sense of, I suppose, give stuff away that isn't necessarily either your core product or is a reduced price product to attract business, and tag them for that uplift that we talked about earlier. So
well, I mean, it's if resources tight, what you've got to do is you've got to build relationships and think about where the revenue will come long term. So you build market share, you build relationships, you build like we started at the beginning with the network piece, and off the back of it is the opportunity to monetize that over time. So that's what you've got to do. Even in my business, I'm not doing public speaking and getting paid for it. My non-execs, the fees have gone down. So what I do is I create visibility. I make sure I'm out there, because actually some stuff will come out of that, and that's exactly the same that businesses are doing, particularly sort of vendors into our space, into our marketplace.
Yeah. Just if we could move on to the sort of, I suppose, the whole future of recruitment and talent acquisition, and I suppose we've talked a lot about what's happening now and how that may affect the future, but I suppose we were on a path and everyone talked about we're moving to artificial intelligence, machine learning products. 5 years down the line, basically you're going to have no agency recruiters, you're going to have chatbots sitting at the front end of stuff, and so has that area been affected, like in the sense of, obviously this recession will have an impact on that, but has it jolted it completely off course, or are we still going to end up, Now, Kevin, I see a wry smile there.
I mean, there's a couple of things. One is, I suppose, that a period of disruption like that gets people to be more creative and more innovative. So people are going to try stuff. I've got a couple of clients that have done some really interesting stuff with technology. It was in the plan, but it was like a year out, 18 months out. They've just gone, let's deploy it now. We've got it. Let's do it, because actually now's a moment. So you'll see some of that. And I think you can see that with both in-house and recruitment agencies going, well, actually, let's just try this stuff. Now's a great opportunity. So I think you'll get some of that. So I think you'll get some early adoption. I think you'll also get people recognizing, I think Hung touched on something that I thought was absolutely spot on. Organizations' data was piss poor at the beginning of this. There were organizations going, where do people live? We've got no data on where our people are. What machinery have they got? What technology have they got? How do we get this system up and running? And it was just like, oh my God, there's nothing in there. So all of a sudden your core HR system, so 70% of the cost of most businesses is people, right? And what became absolutely apparent in week one is most of them haven't got the fundamental basic information about the people that are employed for them. What skills have they got? What's their current capability? Where do they live? What technology have they got? So I think there will be some people that go, we never want to be in a situation. We want to have data on our people so that we can move in real time and be more agile and responsive. So I think this will do two things. I think people will be creative, necessary is the mother of invention. I think there's a bit of that going on. And I also think there's going to be people that go, this data stuff is serious. We need to be much more, and HR functions have been rubbish at arguing for budget, for proper technology, particularly their core systems and stuff. So I think there's a huge demand and a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I think we've seen them spend absolute fortunes though, Kevin, on fancy tech stacks with like lots of different sort of products built into it, but they still seem to a lot of the time not get the basics right. Why is that, Hung? Why do they not have sort of end to end really fantastic systems that basically do the end to end job for them?
I think it's not necessarily the technology, even though technology is a factor. It's more about sort of where the ownership is. So, for instance, we're talking about internal mobility here. Really, the reason why you want to have an understanding of your staff, what skills they have, where's their potential growth, what other jobs they could do, is so you can retain them and you can redeploy them and you can be more agile as a business. Agile with a small a, dictionary definition of the term, meaning that if something changes, you can shift your entire posture of the business and do something else. We're finding we can't do that because we don't have that information now, because we never thought about redeploy. If you think about recruitment, when we hire someone for a role, we hire them for a role. That's it, right? I need a recruiter. Great. You hired a person with a recruiter. You haven't thought for a single second what's happening 2 years down the line about what this person might want to do after that. It's up to that individual to then figure out, evolve his or her career as they go. And then you're surprised 2 years down the line, they hand the notice in because they got another job elsewhere doing something different. So we're not having those conversations when we're doing the recruitment side. So we don't have this joined up thinking. Some of the smarter companies that I've seen are starting to integrate this. They're saying, hey, listen, they have a tour of duty concept to the job. So they understand the job is impermanent. Even our language itself is inadequate. We're saying it's a permanent hire, right? Permanent hire. What does that mean? Like forever? It's like Mount Rushmore style permanence. This person is permanently a recruiter forever in my company? Of course not. But we don't then think, what does the next step sound like? We need to be having that conversation upon the first hire. Like when you're hiring, and I'm hiring you into my company, I need to be saying, hey, listen, you're going to be doing this job for the time being, but what else do you want to do in 12 months time, 6 months time, 18 months time, whenever you feel like you're ready to go? What's the next step look like? We need to have that conversation. We don't. So a lot of this is procedural, a lot of it is cultural. And actually, we find that a lot of the technology, the vendor side, the vendors simply respond to the cultural demands. There hasn't been a demand for lifetime tracking of an employee in terms of their motivation, sentiment, and capability. We've got technology based on how do we efficiently pipeline someone into the business, and then how do we monitor performance in that job? And none of it stitches together. So I think culture's got to change, technology, and vendors will respond.
Yeah, and I think, I've talked a lot about this, but HR got to own this stuff. This is a fundamental tool for being an effective HR director in any kind of organization. Because you go, what capability have I got? Where is it? Where is it in its life cycle? How do I deploy it best? How do I utilize it across the organization? How do we think about potential people that may want to leave the organization? What data have we got on that? How do we retain them? How do we think about internal move? This is just fundamentally the job of being an effective HR function, is understanding the human potential at your fingertips and being able to be creative about thinking about other opportunities, thinking about development, thinking about growth. Yeah, and it is incredibly frustrating to just be in a situation where people have got big systems, but they still weren't really, Hung's point's well made. They're not end to end. They don't join up and they don't work in a way which enables people to extract the data that they need to think differently about their workforce.
Yeah, I think everyone has been waiting for a sort of a revolution, right? Like a revolution in terms of talent acquisition, recruitment, where we move people out at them and the tech does the job, etc. And I think what we've seen probably in the last 10 years anyway is it's more evolution. Things happen sort of, and they sort of sneak up on people and they go, oh yeah, we're using LinkedIn now, and LinkedIn becomes, and these products sort of seem to sort of evolve and grow exponentially once they hit a particular sort of point. So if we fast forward to 2025, right, and I know it's difficult, right, we're in the middle of a bloody an absolute horrendous crisis, but if we fast forward to 2025, what is recruitment and talent acquisition going to look like? What's going to be different, do you think? Majorly different, Hung, do you think?
Majorly different. I think we're going to stop thinking about jobs and workers as discrete units of analysis. So part of the problem with the technology is that we're thinking that a worker is simply doing one job, and a job is only filled by one person. I think the discretion of that is going to start fading, in the sense that people are going to do multiple jobs. They're going to be more task orientated rather than job orientated. Chances are they're going to have more than one employer, more than one revenue stream. One of the things that we have borne witness to, especially the people now on furlough and being made redundant, is the vulnerability they have by having only one supplier of cash. COVID-19 itself could be described as a story of the vulnerability of having a single supply chain, of a super lean supply chain where you're dependent on only one supplier for this particular valve, for this particular product, because it's the most efficient way to do it. Well, if you think about it from a worker's point of view, we're wholly dependent on the supply chain of an employer sending us the money. That only one employer. That employer decides, oh, you're no longer needed, Colin. Guess what? You're on the breadline, literally. Would it not make more sense for you to have a diversified supply of money on revenue streams? So I think 2025, we're going to get a lot more of people who are more keen to have multiple revenue opportunities. That ultimately means they probably will be less willing to accept jobs which will monopolize their ability to do that. Secondly, from a recruiting point of view, that transforms what we're recruiting for. Because it may be we're recruiting now for someone who's a task-based worker for this episodic period that you need this task to be performed, rather than this idea of, oh, I need to recruit this person permanently, you remember the permanent thing, for my team. So I think back to Kevin Wheeler used to talk about this. He may be proved right back in the day. By a company, the shape of a company might change so that it ends up becoming far smaller in terms of FTE, far smaller in terms of core people that are permanently with the business. Typically, they may even be stakeholders or shareholders of that company, but they'll be surrounded by a network or a constellation of resources that will oscillate in and out and interface in different ways. I think, again, if you look at the resiliency of a company, right now, if you're going to set up a company from scratch, you would not hire any full-time employees. You'd want to have a very flexible labor force where everyone is a contractor that can slide in and slide out. You wouldn't mind if they were earning money elsewhere, because you know what? Hey, that helps me because they're not desperate for me to feed them. And you can operate in a genuinely scalable way. Scalable means you can scale up and scale down, by the way. It means you don't just carry a rigid headcount, which all of these businesses are doing, and now they're having to cut. And cutting is really painful, very hard. Whether you're the person getting cut or doing the cutting, you're going to learn some very hard lessons from that, and you're going to do it differently when you know the time to grow again is happening.
I actually really agree with that, but I think the challenge for society is actually going to be, how does society react to that in terms of, I suppose, the parachute for those people as they're moving in and out of employment? Is it going to be universal basic income, or that type of piece that sort of underpins that type of thing? Because once you move, and I think that, so we're talking about ultimately more gig work, more, effectively it's you're moving from, now gig work in the sense of, an Uber driver versus, someone who is able to have a higher value on their time, you know what I mean? It's a slightly different thing, but there's still a challenge in that. Like in Ireland, we've seen it in the training industry in Ireland is very much a sort of a self-employed sort of environment, and all of those people have effectively lost their jobs because you can't do face-to-face training in the current environment. They have no parachute, much less of a parachute than those that are employed. So I think we're going to have a challenge in that. Just one. Cool. So, Kevin, in terms of one product, right? One product, right? By 2025, if you're for agency, and I suppose internal teams, and that should invest in, what would you think it would be?
Well, I think it's the same point, but slightly different. So for me, I think the big thing that employers are going to, big, small, are going to go, is the whole workforce thing. How do I become more agile and more responsive to my market? And I think Hung's right. I think core becomes smaller, more flex around it, people doing multiple gigs, multiple jobs, consultants, contractors, freelancers, call them what you will. So I think that, but there's a tech solution in there that you need to be able to have. What have I got in my constellation? What capability have I got? How can I utilize it? So I think HR becomes much more of about resource planning, capability planning, the whole thing about creating really great teams. If you look at brilliant tech businesses, they're not a business, they're teams, they're groups of people. You read anything about Google or Facebook, we hire great people, we put them in a really great team, we give them an interesting work, organization gets out the way. Our job's to get out the way and let people have really interesting, meaningful work where they're working with people that they enjoy working with. So I think organizations are going to move to a smaller core, more flex, and that's going to create the need for systems and processes to be able to manage that in a much more systemic, holistic way. So that's one piece. Agencies, guys, I just think the whole temp flex stuff is going to be app-based. The whole contingent stuff, I know Cooper quite well. It's a great business backed by Goldman Sachs, doing fantastic work. Okay, it's hospitality. It suffered, pivoted into retail, working with supermarkets. But basically, it's a staffing business without any consultants. Now, you charge the same. You are going to make decent returns very, very quickly if you're a staffing business where the candidates love it. You can do everything at the flick of a click. You can find your gigs as and when you want them. It moves across industry. So that type of technology, there's SIFT, there's Cooper, there's about 5 or 6 of them. But that, I can't see how if I'm an Adecco or a Randstad, I defend my model against those types of businesses. So that's some real disruption in that part of the marketplace. And I think that will most probably extend into the contracting, freelancing space. It's already there to some extent with Upworks but I think that will accelerate. So I think that's what happened on the contingent bit. In the perm stuff, I just think the agencies get smaller. I think they become more specialists, more deep. I just think you can't do everything for everybody. People need to know, candidates know where people are providing value. And I think I think you've got some periods of disruption, both organizationally and in terms of supplier in the recruitment space.
Yeah. Hung, in terms of, a cool tool or a cool product or a cool sort of, in 2 or 3 years, what tool are we going to be using maybe that we're not using so much now to find people, hire people, and, get the best talent into an organization, do you think?
Yeah, a couple of things here, but I just want to address a point that Kevin mentioned, because I think he's absolutely correct. The high volume contingent workforce, increasingly app-based, of course it is. And a lot of those platforms have genuinely disintermediated what used to be a recruiter, or what used to be a recruitment job. So there's a big signal there for what recruiters need to be doing. They need to move up the value chain quickly. They need to specialize on the hard to hire rather than the volume, and get into those growth markets where there is kind of new skills need to be trained. If you're going into biotech, there's going to be hard to find these people. There's going to be these people have yet to emerge from universities and companies. Everyone's a first jobber because it's so new. That's where recruiters really need to be trading. You need to definitely think about getting out of the high street, I would say, because that's going to be apped out and accelerated as a result of this pandemic. Go ahead.
No, go on. Go. Keep going.
Tools that recruiters would be using. I'm a big believer in chatbots, actually, simply because for a lot of the conversations that we need to have, they can be done in an automated way, particularly if the answers are fixed. Availability questions typically are fixed response questions. And recruiters are wasting way too much time still, interrogating candidates for very simple bits of information. Now, what I think will be an innovative step forward 3 years down the line, let's say, is that I think we're going to move away from human to bot conversation to fully automated conversation where we go bot to bot. So in other words, we're going to start seeing candidate representative bots speaking to recruitment representative bots, and only when there's a relevant conversation are humans going to get involved. Because the noise is still too wide. The web hasn't solved the noise; it's made it noisier. The way to reduce the noise is actually get the robots talking to each other.
Cool. And I suppose we talked about that when I was writing my paper a few years ago, and what's that, 3.5 years ago, and things have moved on. You see products like Maya, and the guys in some of the other in Germany and other places are really creating really good sort of chatbots, which can have that sort of real natural language going on and get it to a point. I don't think it goes all the way, but it gets that sort of front end piece, and I think it's going to be critical actually. What happens during recessions is lots more people apply for your jobs. So whether you're an agency recruiter, an internal recruiter, you're probably going to have 3-4 times the level of applications you had, and you're not going. You need the technology to be able to deal with that. I think my belief is that there's something in I suppose the advisory and guidance piece for agencies particularly. I think. And creating a sort of a value stream from that. We see it in our employability business, where we effectively help people back into employment, and the value in actually advising people. There's no one really out there advising sort of individuals, and we're talking about a much more complicated job landscape in the next sort of 4 or 5 years. And I think we're going to see an evolvement of, and it might be an agency, it might be a new type of company that basically advises individuals on how to, so you'll have the bot piece, but you'll have that sort of, consultant sort of actual consultant type of piece.
I mean, I think there is an opportunity. I think we've always had outplacement. We've always had people that have worked at the top end providing careers advice and guidance to individuals, often execs, as they move from one organization to the next, perhaps being displaced. And if you think about the coaching business, there's some really interesting coaching products and tech businesses that could easily pivot into providing some advice, some assessment activity, getting to people to think about what they're great at, providing some basic advice, which could then be supplemented by some human stuff. So I think there is some product opportunity there.
Glassdoor on speed, I call it, Kevin. Glassdoor on speed, man. I think there's a Glassdoor is slightly there, but they're not all the way there.
No, I think Kevin's right. It's going to come from the coaching side. So people are already showing a big passion for like personal coaching apps. It's kind of aligned with this personal development stuff. You download something that's going to help you. I can totally see that moving into the job space. People might get a psych analysis or a skills analysis about what you like or what motivates you. It might then suggest opportunities. And why, if it's going to suggest opportunities, why should it not then reach out for those opportunities for you? So I think that's the space. Whether it's agents that take it on or not, I don't know. Because one of the things that someone's strengths are always their weaknesses as well. And one of the big strengths of agencies is that they're very commercial, very adaptable, and they're very quick to see opportunities. But I think that means that they probably will hop into a different sector rather than go deeper into there and explore what this looks like when it could be, a 6-month, 12-month product build or something like this.
I agree.
It's very clear that agencies struggle to produce good tech. In fact, they never do. They typically buy it in because their mentality is too commercial. Like the ROI, the time frame is too short. So.
Cool. Just we had a poll at the start, and and we asked them what areas will organizations increase their talent acquisition budget most post COVID-19. 62% almost say employer brands, 18% recruitment tech, 18% outsourced recruitment, and 4% in-house. So there's obviously not many in-house people on the webinar anyway, but that's fine. Guys, where do you think, what are the key areas, organizations are going to spend money on, in post-COVID-19?
I think the short term is they're going to be restructuring. They're going to be, how do they get more efficient? How do they get more effective? How do they retain the capability they need? How do they get, reduced cost base? And that's horrible but it will happen across the next few months. I think they'll most probably become more selective in hiring. But the opportunity, I think, and one of the things that I suppose we haven't touched on is this whole thing about branding, which I was interested in that sort of poll, which for me has been a huge opportunity for organisations during this period. An employer brand isn't the blooming jobs page. It isn't the values that are written on the website. It's about how an organisation behaves. And when an organisation is under pressure and its leaders are under pressure, that's when you know what a real employer brand is, about what it really stands for and what it really means. And what we've seen, and I've seen some fantastic leaders and organisations treating people incredibly well. One I know, a chief exec making 200 people redundant, phoned every single one personally, told them it wasn't their fault. They'll when they get to the other side, they'll prioritise them. It's not what you do that people remember in this time. It's what it's how you do it. It's how you make people feel. And an employer brand is about what an organization really means. So how you downsize, how you restructure, how you deal with customers, how you deal with your people at this moment is it's a moment of truth for employer brands, because people are going to look, am I going to work for JD Sports or Wetherspoons or Gordon Ramsay? I'm not sure I am, after the way they've treated their workforce. So again, and other people you've seen, even if they've had to make tough calls, have done it the right way. And it stands the test of time. It's about a DNA, what's inside an organization, and organizations are just groups of human beings, and how you treat your other human beings is how you'll be judged. And I think that's good news. I think it's important, and I think it will be hugely powerful. I think there'll be less advertising and more thinking about who are we and what do we mean.
Yeah, but I think a lot of the research, like companies and organizations, have thrown money into employer brands. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it hasn't been very effective, as you say, in what they've done. Like, it's been a huge spend, piece for them, hasn't it? And we see in Ireland, like we really good companies that help them with that, like Clinch, like Shane Gray and Clinch, is a really great product and they deliver great messaging. But Hung, where do you see the money being spent in the next sort of couple of years post COVID-19 by organizations?
Technology, workforce automation, roboticization, nothing that's good for people, unfortunately. But the reaction to companies when we do make cuts is that we typically don't recruit the same volume back. We do recruit a few, but as Kevin said, it's an opportunity to restructure. Typically, we're going to look at the bits where, a machine or a bit of software could do this. We couldn't strip it out before because of all of the different pressures that are there. We're going to get smaller businesses, basically. Think also about how we distribute, how companies have suddenly gone distributed. You have Barclays, for instance, saying, hey, listen, maybe we can just go remotely from now. They're starting to question why they need 7,000 people in the building. They're going to have a lot of those people go and do their work remotely. You know what? They're going to discover 30% of those people and wonder what the hell they were doing anyway. I think co-location creates work. Because there's a lot of middle management suddenly required. There's a lot of there's additional stuff that occurs where there's no real kind of business reason for it. So I think a distributed company is naturally skinnier than a co-located one. So unfortunately, what this means is that we're going to end up having less jobs on that basis. Smaller companies, less work. Probably, I hope, the way we're going to deal with that is that we'll end up spreading the work across more people. So we'll do less hours, let's say. Maybe we'll have the opportunity to work on multiple kind of revenue streams. So all of those will not be 40 hours each. And perhaps we'll find another way to, support the economic system, as you mentioned earlier, with some sort of permanent stipend for the citizens, which may be the best way to keep it going. It's a systems kind of maintenance idea right now. It's not an altruism one. It's not left wing, right wing. It's like, we need to actually keep people, give them some money so they can pay the damn rent. Yeah.
We're just about there, guys. Look, I just want to say thanks a million, particularly to you, Hung. Taking the time. Look, you're really, really busy. And just to say to anyone who's not signed up to Recruiting Brain Food, get on there, get signed up, get interacting. I think Kevin's king of the tree at the moment, isn't he? We have to knock him off that bloody perch, I think.
I've been trying algorithmically to get rid of him. but he's really difficult to move because.
So Hung, tell me the secret. How did I get there? I don't know.
Well, we're trying. Basically, what I've done, I've just shared it, by the way. There, it's called the Food Hall of Fame. So this is essentially my attempt to say thank you to people who've supported the newsletter and other things. And we've kind of scored it. So whenever you promote the newsletter publicly, that I can see it, I'll make a note of that. We've built a scraper which scrapes it and scores you. So Kevin, you consistently promote it every week. You do. We counted it 68 times. So you score points. Therefore, you're king of the tree. Colin, you're very close. You're top as well. You're right there.
Number 5 or 6.
But you know what? As a sign of the times, this was a beta product we never released. But then I realized that so many people are kind of coming onto the market. Everyone's availability was starting to become a little bit more. Everyone is job insecure, including all of us. And I just thought, you know what? Why don't I repurpose this as a kind of a jokey thank you thing, but make it into like a Craigslist for availability, so that jump onto the Food Hall of Fame. You set your availability week to week. That declares to the recruiting brain food community whether you're available for other work or available for other projects. So if you're income insecure or job insecure now, sign up to it, free to use, and just tell people, hey, I've got 2 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours this week. I could do something. And then someone else in that group will see it and potentially pick you up.
Very good, very good. Hung, the burning question, what the bloody hell is going on with Newcastle, man? Are we, going to see a resurrection, the phoenix coming from the flames, or...
I actually like Mike Ashley. I'm one of the very few Newcastle fans that would say, I know, shocking, I know. But the reason why I liked him is because of his utter contempt for the fans. It was annoying to begin with, but then I thought, you know what, this guy just literally doesn't give a damn. And he ran his own thing. All right, relegated twice, doesn't care. And I respect him as a manager for doing that, even though I would never work for a business run by Mike Ashley. But now, I'm going to miss that kind of bittersweet experience of supporting Newcastle under him. It will equally be bittersweet with this Saudi sort of external stuff. There's all kinds of ethical issues there, not only about regime, but also about, what about financial fair play and all this type of stuff, right? So who knows? I have no idea. I'd just love to see football happen again. I want Steve Bruce to see it out. I'd hate to see him get sacked. I think he's done all right,
Well, I think what we're going to do is to thank you again, Hung, for coming on, and Kevin. We're going to get you guys to a hurling or a GAA football match in the next year or two. We're going to get you over to Croke Park, and we'll make sure when you're over, Hung, we get you along to a match, and you'll see some real stuff. Not this tippy tappy Arsenal type of stuff. We sort of see
been a bit tippy tappy recently.
Yeah. But listen, just a huge thank you, guys. For coming on. I think the chat bar tells you how really insightful things are. Two of the leaders within I suppose, recruitment and HR thinking really worldwide. So great to have you on, and we'll catch up again soon. Look after yourselves.
Take care, everybody.
Cheers, Colin.
Bye.
Cheers, mate.